we're going to give a couple more minutes for all of our followers here to get on board with our beautiful walk through the Sacramento City Cemetery. My name is Tina Glasson, and I am one of the historical interpreters for the Sacramento History Museum, and we are blessed with a sunny day here in the City Cemetery, and we'll be back in just a moment to start our tour. All right, we're here today in the Sacramento City Cemetery. Beautiful sunny day to talk about women in fashion. Now, we're not going to go into a lot of detail on things that have already been covered earlier this week on Facebook. You can follow that in the Sacramento History Museum's prior broadcasts on Victorian fashion. Now, Victorian fashion was any clothing that were designed during Queen Victoria's reign from 1837 all the way to 1901. 64 years of fashion. But we're going to start by talking about one of the most notorious women in the city of Sacramento, Amy Crocker. Yes, Crocker Art Museum. Her father was the attorney for the Big Four of the Transcontinental Railroad, also a California Supreme Court justice. Now, Amy Crocker was only 10 years old when her father passed away, and she was spoiled as spoiled comes. Now, in an era when all the women are wearing bustles and petticoats and hooped skirts, Amy wore pants and had tattoos. Now, as understandably scandalous as that may seem, well, we want to just remember that women in this particular time were very uncomfortable. There was such a thing as smelling salts for a reason, because the corsets alone were cinching those waists so tight you couldn't breathe. Next thing you know, you're passing out on the floor, and those smelling salts is what's going to keep you going. All right, going to revive you. It wasn't just some southern talk. This is actual fact that women were tortured by fashion. No wonder Amy Crocker chose to wear pants. She had tattoos all over her body. During her lifetime, she was married to much younger men in every decade of her life. Now, she had a very good relationship with a very famous author by the name of Rudyard Kipling, who wrote a very wonderful, famous story called The Jungle Book. All right. Not only that, but she named her pet boa constrictor after one of those characters in Jungle Book. Yep, that's right. His name was Caw, and she slept with Caw. Wonderful as that may seem. All right, and she died here in Sacramento in 1941, 1864 to 1941. She had a very wonderful lifetime full of vagabonds and famous authors all over the world. That's happening right here with women in the city of Sacramento. Now, the next story I'm going to tell you is one of a fashion don't. Now, we had a sheriff here during the 1860s and 50s, 60s, 1870s, and also a winemaker up in Folsom, California, right outside in a place called Mormon Island. His name was Benjamin Norton Bugbee, and his wife's name, his first wife that is, was Mary Jane Bugbee. And she was a slave to fashion. Not only was she a slave to fashion, she loved to shop. And at one point, at her day of demise, that fashion came back to bite her. Now, Mary Jane, she was very well known to get on a horse ride side saddle all the way from Mormon Island to a train stop to get all the way up into Sacramento, take the Sacramento Valley Railroad from Folsom up to Sacramento. One day she gets on her horse, she side saddle, her husband grabs hold of the reins of the horse. They start their journey. Now, let me explain something. Mary Jane liked one particular type of hoop sewn into her petticoat, and that particular hoop was a single coil. So it started very small at the waistline, and it just did itself a little coil all the way through the layers of petticoat, all the way to the very bottom of the petticoat. She's sitting side saddle. She's got a single coil petticoat on. Her husband starts out on the journey. Something spooks that horse. Horse reins back, but her husband grabs the reins, quiets him back down. They continue their journey. A little while later, the same thing happens again. Now this time, that horse went woo, way back. Mary Jane went way back too. Unfortunately, she couldn't grab the saddle horn of the saddle in time to right herself back up, and she fell down onto the ground. Unfortunately, even though she fell, that single coil, well, that grabbed hold of the saddle horn, and that horse took off about between 50 and 100 feet before it stopped, and Mary Jane's head hit every stone in the road on the way. And unfortunately, she ended up dying of her injuries. So all I can say is we all want to say a very sad, sad prayer for Mary Jane Bugbee, fashion victim. All right. So another woman that was very notorious here in the city of Sacramento was Lola Montes. Now, Lola Montes, she's here in Sacramento's very early years. She was only here for 1 week. And in that week, she's staying at Orleans Hotel in 2nd Street. And she is performing at the Eagle Theater on Front Street. Now, she's got men staying outside her room asking her to marry them. And men are hooting and hollering because Lola did a very famous dance called the spider dance. Now, spiders were sewn into the material of her skirt, and she'd sashay on the stage, and she'd twist and turn, and those spiders move all over the place. All right. Lola Montes also had a pet bear. She lived in Grass Valley, California, and she horsewhipped men that would dare to write slander about her in the local newspapers. This was a woman that took control of every situation. These aren't some demure, oh, whatever the man says I will do. These were women that took control of their lives. Amy Crocker, wearing pants. Mary Jane Bugbee, riding side saddle while wearing a hoop skirt. Lola Montes, not letting anyone do anything she didn't want them to do, or herself for that reason, all right? And now we're going to talk about why I'm dressed like this. All right. Now, I portray a very notorious individual named Charlie Parkhurst. Now, Charlie Parkhurst was actually born Charlotte Parkhurst in 1812. And by the time Charlotte was 12 years old, both of her parents had been killed in a very bad accident, and that left Charlotte an orphan. So Charlotte went to the local orphanage at that time because she wasn't able to fend for herself yet. When she got to the orphanage, she was told she was going to have to learn how to cook and clean, maybe one day spark herself a man and have 8 to 10 children, which was a normal family size. Charlotte wanted nothing to do with that, so she ran away from the orphanage, cut off her beautiful curly hair, and got herself a job in one of the local stables working with horses. And by the time the gold rush came along in 1848, her name now being Charlie Parkhurst, she was one of the premier stagecoach operators on the eastern seaboard when she decided to make the trip to California. However, by this time, no one knows that he is a she. She gets to California, works for